If you've ever been curious about replacing all-purpose flour with oat flour, today's recipe is for you. I'm giving my classic chocolate chip cookie recipe a gluten-free spin by replacing the white flour with whole grain oat flour. Now, the reason I love oat flour is because it's affordable, it's accessible, and it's easy to make at home. If you have oatmeal in your kitchen, you can make your own oat flour. To get started on these cookies, preheat your oven to 350 degrees. In a large bowl, add 1 stick of softened butter, or you can use vegan butter to keep this dairy-free, and 3/4 cup of coconut sugar. I like to use coconut sugar because it's less sweet than white sugar, but it still gives these cookies a classic chewy texture. Mix those together, then add in 1 egg and 1 teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now you'll add in a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1 3/4 cup of oat flour. This is more flour than a traditional cookie recipe calls for, but when you're substituting oat flour for all-purpose flour, it's important that you substitute by its weight rather than by its volume. So if your cookie recipe calls for 1 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour, you may need to use up to a 1/2 cup more of oat flour because oat flour weighs less than a wheat-based flour. An easy formula that you can use to calculate the amount of oat flour you'll need is multiplying the number of cups of all-purpose flour by 1.4. For example, if you multiply 1 1/4 cup by 1.4, you'll get 1 3/4 cup, which is exactly how much oat flour you'll need for this recipe. If you'd like to make your own oat flour at home, you'll need to grind 225 grams of rolled oats, which is roughly 2 cups plus 2 tablespoons of rolled oats. Now that you've added everything to the bowl, you just need to mix it until the batter looks thick and uniform. Since this cookie dough is gluten-free, you also don't have to worry about overmixing it. Finally, you'll add in 3/4 cup of dark chocolate chips and stir those in. Line a baking sheet with parchment paper, then use a 1 ounce cookie scoop or a heaping tablespoon to scoop the batter onto the pan. I like to space the cookies about 2 inches apart from each other to allow for spreading as they bake. I also like to top the cookies with an extra sprinkle of coarse sea salt. Place the pan in the oven and bake at 350 degrees for 8 to 11 minutes, depending on how crispy you like your cookies. I tend to pull them out right at 8 minutes so they'll have soft centers with lightly crispy edges. Just like traditional cookies, these oat flour cookies will feel soft and fragile when they are hot out of the oven, but they will firm up as they cool on the pan. These taste just as delicious as the version made with white flour and sugar, and they are naturally gluten-free when you use certified gluten-free oats or oat flour. You can store these cookies at room temperature for a few days, but oat flour baked goods tend to dry out if you don't keep them in an airtight container. I prefer to store them in the fridge for up to a week, or they will keep in your freezer for up to 3 months if you'd like to make a larger batch. You can grab the printable version of this recipe to save for later over on my website, detoxinista.com. And if you liked this video, do me a favor and give it a thumbs up, and check out my other videos here for more delicious real food recipes.